Hey commanders, this is a guide on windmills. You might be thinking right now that you don't need a guide on windmills. This is reasonable as they seem simple. However, the information in this video was chosen because I see commanders do a lot of odd things. In this video, I'll address everything you need to know about building windmills. Now let's get into it. There are two windmills in Bar, one for arm and another for core. Both arm and core windmills are 175 energy. However, the arm windmill is 37 metal, while core's is 45. For those without a calculator, that's more than 20% more metal for core windmills when compared with arm. So the key takeaway number one is if you're going to build a lot of windmills and you have the option, make sure they are arm. Armed with this knowledge and the army of butlers you've probably made by now to spam arm windmills, when should you actually make them? The game says when wind is lower than 5 for arm and 6 for core that you should build solar instead of wind. In an effort to not spend an entire video going through an Excel spreadsheet over the different values for wind, I'm going to give you my personal strategy instead. I went back through a lot of the maps I've played recently and tried to gauge which ones felt terrible to spam wind on. And the general rule I've come up with is if average wind is greater than 10, I spam wind, as in I make as much as possible everywhere. Alternatively, if wind is below 10, I tend to make enough windmills that I can make fusions, maybe, 1 to 3, and then I make aphis after that. I might still make wind, but not nearly as much as I would if it was above 10. Anecdotes are not my favorite form of suggestion, as in, I'd rather just give you a formula and tell you what the number is. However, even up to the current date that I'm recording this video, which is, I started recording this a while ago, you can still see that this is being debated here. And the players that are talking about this are some of the best players in the game. I blurred out their names though because I didn't ask them and I didn't want to put them on blast. I did, however, link a couple of spreadsheets from this Discord thread so that you can draw your own conclusions. Next, let's talk about how you should go about building windmills. Each of these grids are 10 by 10. Obviously, there are 100 windmills in the square, but how many are in the others? And what are the trade offs being made here? For the square, you're 100% space efficient, but you're 0% safe. So, places you'll see this are in the air spot or occasionally partially in eco, but you never want to build all of your base like this. I'll link a video that shows why you don't want to make your base this way. The key takeaway here is that windmills that are built more than 2 wide will chain. The next most dense configuration would be building windmills that are 2 wide with 1 gap in between. The pros of this are there are lanes between the windmills so that you don't have to go all the way around them. They're more dense than just making a grid, as I'll show here in a moment. Everything lines up, and if you like building windmills in all of the little squares, then it works for that. And they effectively don't chain, although they can do that slightly given like the perfect scenario, but they usually do stop chaining at some point. The con is they do take slightly longer to place given that you have to draw the rows, but this doesn't really bother me, and the 70% density version is my preferred configuration. Kind of the last configuration I see people use is the what I like to call 50% efficient way of building windmills. And there are pros to doing this. So let's talk about it. What are the pros? The pros are they also don't chain when they're built like this. The other pro over the 70% density version is that they're faster to place. So you can grab your constructors and drag a grid and that's it. The cons of building windmills this way are they're even less dense, and your units can't path through them as the space between the windmills is only 1/3 of one of the small grids wide. For the final section, let's talk about some intuition. How long does it take for a T1 bot to make a windmill? What about 2 butlers? Or how long does it take a single windmill to pay for itself if you're trying to make metal out of energy? These are all really good questions and ones that you want to have a good idea about when you're going to plan your economy. So T1 bot makes a windmill in 20 seconds. 2 butlers makes a windmill in 6 seconds. And the amount of time it takes for an arm windmill to pay for itself is 186 seconds, and for core, it's 221 seconds. This is, of course, if wind was stable at 15 energy per second, but as we all know, wind likes to go up and down as it pleases. So Mileage may vary, but this is a general rule, and you can adjust this based on the maps that you're playing. Some will be higher, some will be lower, and the wind will pay for itself faster or slower based on this. Did you guys see it? I'm curious if anyone watching noticed something interesting happen. There are four sets of butlers building windmills in different configurations. You'll see the ones that are building them vertically, one set of butlers is building them six at a time, and the other is building them in order. And that depends on how you place them. One of them is using a blueprint, the other is using Shift and Alt to space the windmills. Now you'll see a corresponding pair in the center of the large grid of laterally built windmills. You'll see some that are also using the blueprint, and the others that are using Shift and Alt. Take special notice that the ones that were building laterally, notice that they actually don't get done at the same time. For some reason, and I don't have an answer to this, blueprints that are placed going horizontally have a different configuration than those going vertically. So, as you can see on the left, going vertically, they go side to side like a zipper. When they go left to right, they go one line all the way down and then one line all the way back, which is less efficient. However, you'll notice that when you're using the blueprint that builds them six at a time, the butlers end at the same time, east to west, as they do north to south. And in this demonstration, the windmills are 46 long. That's just all the room that I had. But you'll notice that the ones that are going north to south get done about 4 windmills earlier. Just food for thought. And I'd played thousands of games at this point, and I learned that thousands of games in. So don't feel bad if you didn't know that. The last common way that windmills get built are with a T1 constructor and con turrets. I think you'll find this interesting, how quickly these windmills get built. I've included a couple of examples here. One where they have like the 50% density, the other with 70%, and all of this is within the build radius of one con turret. For comparison, at the top there, you see that butlers are building laterally using the blueprint that builds six at a time, just so we have a baseline to go with. The butlers on the top lane are building 150 windmills, and this is roughly the amount of windmills that is in a full circle using the 70% configuration. It works out to, yeah, it's around 150. I think it's 154 in this video. I will note that on the left, I have two building in the 50% configuration because I ran this a couple times and the constructor actually gets stuck. So in the middle one, I have it where he can get out if it needs to. But that's something you want to consider when you're using that. Takeaways from this are butlers are really efficient. Technically, they have the same amount of build power as a T1 constructor and a con turret. However, they get done considerably earlier than the T1 constructor and a con turret in the 70% configuration, which is a good comparison because they're building basically the same amount of windmills. One thing you might not be aware of is how much build power it takes to make a windmill. Believe it or not, it takes a lot more build power to make wind than fusion or aphis. For example, to make or build a single metal of wind, it costs 43 build power, or half of a T1 constructor's build power per second. Where similarly, one metal of a fusion would be 16 build power, or an aphis would be 32 build power, which is really interesting. And no, this video is not about fusions or aphis, but it's something to consider that whenever you're building windmills, you do need to have a decent amount of build power. This is why you often see two or three, I generally use three tier 1 constructors or two butlers when building windmills. Thanks for watching this video on windmills. Let me know if you learned something in the comments down below, or if I missed something, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more videos. If you're still watching this video, you're an absolute legend, and you get a bonus tip. And that bonus tip is, windmills also explode and damage ticks, so when you're raiding with ticks, make sure you stay out of the explosion radius. You can see this by hovering over a windmill and holding down space and X.